Now, whenever you are talking about towns and cities, every creation that you're talking about, it is just a reflection of your aspiration, your vision, and definitely whatever challenges were there in that era. For instance, let's say Delhi, and I'm not talking about New Delhi, let's say Delhi, okay? That was created because somebody wanted to rule the entire country. Or let's say Jamshedpur, that was created with the intention of creating an industrial town. And everyone is well aware, during the Industrial Revolution, England also underwent a lot of transformation for industrialization. Now, not long back, but once upon a time, there was a place which is very rich in agricultural attributes in California. Now, if you try to search that, you will not find it, because that rich agricultural Californian land has been transformed into what we famously call as the Silicon Valley. Okay. Similarly, such transformations have happened in India, very right in Bangalore. Okay. Now the IT city or the electronic city that we are talking about, that was once upon a time villages, marshy land and lakes. So, with need, with demand, with evolution, places are undergoing transformation. Now, it's a question mark whether these transformations are actually smart. But now that optical fibers are as ubiquitous as electricity, we are hearing new terms such as smart city. But down the line, I would still say that whatever smart city concept we are talking about, there are three main challenges. One is, of course, urbanization, rampant urbanization, population, and yes, what we're going to discuss today, that is climate crisis. Now, my dear friends, we are in the world of outcome-based education. So probably by the end of this presentation, I will be trying hard, and I hope that you will be able to follow what I'm speaking, wherein I will try to tell you that probably the need is not for smart cities, the need is for climate smart cities. So at the end of the presentation, I hope that some nuances, some knowledge that I have, which I had picked up during my doctoral research, will be transferred. Okay, with that understanding, let's try to see how the presentation will be dealt. So today, probably the audience will understand something about smart cities. Yes, I am not an expert on smart cities. I'm not an expert on anything. Okay, I have few knowledge in urban warming, urban climatology, urban heat islands, which I'll be sharing with you. But in this presentation, we need to understand what are smart cities. That's just a brief introduction. How exactly is climate being managed in smart cities? And is it really necessary to manage climate in any smart city? Moving on, I'll be trying to distinguish between global warming and urban warming. Now, further ahead, I'll be explaining to you data anomalies. I'll explain to you the technological aspects with respect to urban warming. To enhance the understanding, okay, I'll also be sharing a case study with respect to Bangalore. And finally, towards the end of the presentation, I will share a few recommendations on how to inculcate or how to introduce the component of climate sustainability into smart cities. Therefore, no more smart cities, but climate smart cities. So, my dear friends and colleagues, now, whenever you speak about smart city, probably in the year 1992, there was no word called a smart city. It was actually smart growth. I'll repeat, smart growth. And this was actually an alternative paradigm to urban sprawl, because that was the era when urbanization was rampant, sprawls were rampant, and there were a lot of detached housing. A group of people, basically planners, architects, and historic preservationists, they came together and they started thinking about smart growth. Now, the best part about this is, from 1992, there were a lot of agencies or companies that came together and they started the idea of a smart city, which means the concept of smart city came thanks to companies like IBM, Cisco, Siemens, and Microsoft. In fact, Massachusetts Institute of Technology was also involved in this process of evolving it. But the real break came in 2008. I'm sure most of us know that in 2008, there was a global economic crisis. As a result of this, smart cities came into prominence. In fact, 2011, that is 3 years down the lane, there is a trademark with IBM for smarter cities. Now, since the organizers have taken a very apt, a very relevant topic with respect to smart cities, I'm sure all the audience have gone through certain literatures, and I'm sure everybody knows that in 2014 the government of India, they came up with a plan of 100 smart cities. Okay, now I'm also sure that you will be realizing, if you have read the newspapers or if you are into the into research with respect to town planning, the central government had instructed every state government to nominate 3 cities which can be evolved into smart cities. But what we need to understand is, these smart cities, the framework for smart cities, the guiding principles for smart cities actually came up from the principles of the Sustainable Development Goals. That still remains the pillar for it. Okay, now what exactly are the features of smart cities? As you can see on the screen, yes, definitely adequate water supply, assured electric supply, sanitation, definitely. And, when it comes to Bangalore, you're talking about solid waste management. Yes, urban mobility, public transport, IT connectivity, and, if they may also include something called as digital information technology, which is basically to handle disasters. Now, most of the disasters are connected to geology or climate. Now, my dear friends, basically, when they say smart city, the postulation that they have is, if a city is converted to a smart city, they will be able to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, which actually causes global warming, climate shift, and they are postulating about 10 to 15%. Supposedly, if you convert Bangalore into a smart city, you can save about 130 kilograms of solid waste. You can reduce that. Okay. Probably when it comes to water conservation, yes, maybe 25 to 30 liters. But having said all this, we still need to understand whether we are talking about smart city, implementable smart city, or sustainable smart city. I'll just show you a small video to enhance the knowledge of what a smart city is. I hope you can see this video, anybody in the audience, and I hope you can hear it.
Yes, sir, it is audible.
Thank you, madam.
ನೂರ್ ಸರ್ ಫೋಟೋ ಗಿಟೋ ತೆಕ್ಕೊಳ್ತಿದ್ದೀರಾ ಅದ್ರಲ್ಲ ಇಲ್ಲ ನಾನು ಆಫ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದೀನಿ
Thank you. So I believe that, this video has given you a little more enhanced information and better understanding of what a smart city would look like, okay, if not be. Now, but we still need to ask a question. If you recollect, I had stated that, is it a smart city you're talking about, or an implementable smart city, or is it a sustainable smart city? Okay, we need to be very clear, because whenever you speak about metropolitan, just because your city or town has a huge population, it doesn't really mean that it's a great achievement. Okay, at the same time, yes, as the first premier of the Free India had stated, whenever your city is growing, yes, you must keep in pace so that you always present the future. But it depends, because whenever you are speaking about smart city concept, even if you speak about climate, we need to understand that they're not talking about urban climate. They're talking about the global climate. Okay, now let me try to shed some more light on you. All this is happening just because of one word: urbanization. Okay, just because of urbanization. Everyone knows it's the most exploited word. Everybody has knowledge about what urbanization is, the transformation is, and what all perils are coming due to urbanization, whether you say air pollution, whether you say soil pollution, whatever it is. But we need to understand that, whatever we are talking about is probably slightly out of focus, because, whatever you hear about urbanization, whether it is ozone depletion, global warming, acid rain, okay, they're actually like page 3 of your newspaper, limelight, okay? But there are certain things which go missing or unnoticed, which can be more dangerous. Now, since we are talking with respect to climate sustainability, there are two types of warming. Okay, one is global warming and the second is urban warming. I believe, yes, I also remember Shubha ma'am had spoken about that in yesterday's afternoon session. Now let's try to have an understanding of what is global warming. I know all of you know it, better than me, but yes, what is global warming? We have radiations coming from sun. Okay, some of these radiations are reflected, some of them are refracted. Okay, sometimes these radiations. Yes. Now, what is going to be a consequence of this? If your radiations are not absorbed by the earth, yes, earth tends to become cooler. We are all, warm-blooded animals. We cannot survive in a Siberian state. But what if your earth continues to keep absorbing the radiations? Okay, now we generally have a misconception that global warming is the rise in temperature of the earth. No, absolutely not. Global warming is actually the average increase in the temperature of air, surface, and the air near the surface. Okay, now that's basically what is global warming. And now everyone has spoken about this. Everyone is talking about measures to control global warming, even smart city concept as well. Okay, they have spoken about climate measures, and all these measures are only with respect to the global warming. Now, what we need to understand is, if we are only focusing on global warming, will the real problems be solved? Will the real issue be solved? Because, maybe I think I can explain to you with a better example. We are all aware that, the word environment is not a English word. It's basically from France. And, once upon a time when we were taught in schools, or probably still they teach in schools, environment is something which surrounds you. Absolutely not. Environment is not anything that surrounds you. Environment is something which is surrounding you immediately, which means the one which is in your close proximity. I cannot say that Himalaya is my environment. Rather not. I would rather say that, my environment would be the room in which I am seated right now. Okay, because something which is closer to you, something which is in proximity to you, that is the one which is going to influence you the most, definitely the most, which means Corona. Okay, now in the advent of COVID-19, nothing has influenced you and me more than COVID. Okay, yes, definitely I pray for, stay indoors and stay safe. But yes, COVID is a perfect example of environment. COVID is around us, COVID is near us, and hence we are indoors. So environment from now on is anything which immediately surrounds us. Okay, so if that is the reality, then why are we talking about global warming? Why is global warming really important? Let me show you a small video. Probably this video will run for 5 minutes, but I want you to understand how destructive or how threatening global warming can be. And if you understand the seriousness of global warming, then you'll understand the significance of what I'm going to speak later. So kindly bear with me. I believe that these tools will be much better in explaining the concept of global warming to you.
This real-life lore video is sponsored debate that Earth is the result of human activity since the mid-20th century, and 97 out of 100 actively.
Madam, is the video visible and audible?
Human activity is extremely.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
As a result of this, ice around the world is melting and raising the planet's sea levels. The oceans already rose by 6 centimeters during the course of the 19th century.
I want all of you to kindly observe the video very carefully, because this is something which is staring at our face, and there is something else which is also staring at us, but we are not observing it, or we are not looking at that. So if you can understand the relevance of this video, I'm sure that we'll be more careful. So just give me 5 minutes to play this video.
But they rose by 19 centimeters during the 20th century, over 3 times faster than they rose during the previous century. NOAA estimates that global sea levels could rise by up to 2.5 meters by the year 2100, which would have devastating consequences. If this happens, entire island countries like the Maldives, Marshall Islands, Kiribati, and Tuvalu will be submerged.
Sir, can you increase the volume, sir?
Yes, madam. But this is the maximum I can enhance in my system. Okay, I'm sorry.
Situation where hundreds of thousands of stateless people will have to find a new home. 150 million total climate.
I can always share this video with the participants. I can email it to you.
Okay, sir.
Maybe at the end of the day.
Billion people, 18% of the global population at that time. But in an even worse case scenario than this, however, what would happen if all the ice on Earth melted? If all the ice on Antarctica, Greenland, and the world's glaciers melted into the ocean, it would raise global sea levels by an incredible 68.3 meters. Such a catastrophe would take 5,000 years at the current rate of ice melting to happen, but it would severely alter the geography of our planet. In North America, Vancouver, Seattle, Portland, and most of San Diego and Los Angeles would be underwater. San Francisco would be an island, and San Jose would be destroyed by the waves. The San Francisco Bay would greatly expand in size to completely swallow Sacramento. The Gulf of California would expand so far north that Palm Springs would become a coastal city, while on the Atlantic coast, the ocean would expand to swallow the cities of Corpus Christi, Houston, New Orleans, the entire state of Florida, as well as the entire state of Delaware, almost all of Long Island, and the cities of New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, D.C., and Boston. South America would also be severely flooded with 2 new inland seas existing on the continent, and the cities of Buenos Aires, Montevideo, and Rio de Janeiro would all be underwater. Europe would be one of the most devastated areas in the world. The entire country of the Netherlands would be underwater, and so would nearly all of Denmark and half of Belgium. The British Isles would become more of an archipelago, and London would be totally buried beneath the sea. Northern Germany would also be entirely underwater, including the city of Berlin, and Venice in Italy would have long since been reclaimed by the Adriatic Sea. Istanbul would also be underwater, the Crimean Peninsula would become the Crimean Island, and the Black and Caspian Seas would be connected with one another, which would mean that Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, and Azerbaijan would no longer be landlocked countries. Africa would perhaps be the least severely affected continent, but Egypt would be severely damaged by having both Alexandria and Cairo going underwater. The Persian Gulf, meanwhile, would swallow the entire countries of Qatar and Bahrain, and the city of Baghdad. India and Pakistan would be badly damaged, but the entire country of Bangladesh would cease to exist in this catastrophe. Hundreds of millions of people would be underwater in China, including Beijing and Shanghai, in addition to the cities of Seoul, Pyongyang, and Tokyo. Australia would be home to a new inland sea, and finally, Antarctica would become more of an archipelago. But unlike the Antarctica of today, this Antarctica would likely be habitable and easily colonizable by future humans. So what can we do?
So what can we do? What really can we do? Okay, now, even when you speak about smart city concept, we need to understand what the primary vision was and what the new vision is. In fact, if you really observe the trend, if you look at the framework of smart city development, you can observe that there has been a change. You know, initially it was greenfield development. Now it is moving on to brownfield development. That means you are actually ignoring the natural landscape. We are all talking about pan city development. Even the Ministry of Urban Development only speaks about that. Why India has to be scared is because, you know, we are generating at least 6.5% of the global greenhouse gas emissions. And you know, when you rank us, it's a very sad state of affair, but we are ranked second when it comes to deaths due to climate change or disasters and so forth. So what should we do? Even if you speak about the innovative pilot projects which have been enhanced, even if you speak about the smart cities, even if you speak about smart climate cities, in fact there has been a proposal, and I believe it's on, to make Calcutta, or rather Kolkata, India's first climate resilient city. But again, when you speak about climate, they're only referring to the global climate. Okay, but there's, as I said, there's something which is more scarier. So if you have friends, if you have relatives in those part of the world which I just showed you a video with, that means they are looking at an impending threat. Now, something can make this threat more dangerous. Okay, and that's not global warming, and that is urban warming. I believe yesterday Shubha ma'am had spoken about urban heat islands. I'm exactly referring to that. Okay, now in simple words, urban heat island is a phenomenon wherein the city is hotter, warmer when compared to the surrounding landscapes. Okay, now if global warming is leading us to extinction, let me tell you, urban warming is going to accelerate it. In fact, all of us are aware, global warming is basically a natural process, but now the global warming that you're referring to is a man-made, anthropogenic, accelerated phenomenon. In the similar manner, urban warming is also man-made, anthropogenic. And all those cities that you spoke about, they are not rural landscapes, they are urban landscapes, which means they're not just looking at global warming, they are looking at urban warming. Now, let me give you a brief information about what are urban heat islands. Now, urban heat islands were first discovered in the 18th century in London by Luke Howard. Okay, now it has evolved since then, moving on to Paris. And initially in the beginning days, the manner in which urban heat islands were monitored or quantified was by just studying the air temperature data of the historical places, or the historical data. In fact, moving on from the stationary data, researchers, they started working on mobile data. Let's say William Schmidt in Vienna, that's the 20th century. But until then, nobody had coined a word called as urban heat islands. It was a gentleman called as Gordon Manley. Okay, he was the person who created or coined the term urban heat islands. Now, if anyone is interested to pursue this as a research, which is integral to any town planning, you can refer the papers of T.R. Oakey. Okay, he's a researcher, a scientist who has done incredible work on urban heat islands. Now, for the information of everybody, heat islands can be exhibited in two manners. Okay, it can be a surface heat island or an atmospheric heat island, exactly like global warming. Now, heat islands can be exhibited during the daytime and the nighttime, but the strongest effect of heat island is always during the night. Now, as you see those keywords, historical data is when you compare the data of old cities, old villages. Real-time data is when you take readings on a real-time basis. This is where smart city comes into the picture, because in smart city, you're talking about sensors, you're talking about Internet of Things, you're talking about data integration. So this is where real-time data comes in handy. This is where smart cities need to incorporate climate monitoring techniques. Okay, now these techniques can be stationary, can be mobile. As Shubha ma'am had explained, they have 12 weather monitoring stations and so forth. Whenever you are studying urban heat islands, there are three scales that you can refer to: a mesoscale, a local scale, and a micro scale. Depending on what area you're referring to. Okay, now just like global warming, urban heat islands or urban warming is also contributed by all these factors that you see on your screen. Lack of vegetation, removal of natural landscape, disappearance of lakes, disappearance of forests, more and more industrial flumes, automobile exhaust, and yes, the advent of air conditioners. Okay, now let me try to make it very clear. Okay, let me make a humble effort to distinguish between urban warming and global warming. And the reason is imperative because there is still war going on. There is still two distinct people who believe that there is nothing called as urban warming. They say the entire climate of the earth is covered by ocean. Okay, we are all aware that 70% of the earth is covered by ocean, and your climate, my climate, our climate, okay, is controlled by the oceanic currents. So there's nothing called as urban warming. So they strongly believe there is nothing called as urban warming. They say it's only global warming. If you go into the literature survey, you'll find huge literatures wherein people are battling the claims. But my effort is to prove that yes, urban warming also exists. Now, before I get into a case study to make it more clear, I like to explain that, there were many reasons why we can defend that urban warming exists. In fact, all the historical studies that have been carried out, they were never able to, clearly distinguish or define what is urban and what is rural. Okay, once upon a time, something which was a village may not exhibit the same features as we are talking, they are evolving, the landscapes are evolving. So how do you really say that that village remained a village for the hundreds of years? Then your data is not correct. And how really can you, vouch for the stability or the functioning of the sensors or your Stevenson screen? Okay, now, if you look at the image on the screen, they have a Stevenson screen which is actually measuring the temperature, and you have vehicles next to it. That gives a wrong picture. Obviously, when you have exhaust coming out, it is warm, and that warmth will add on to the temperature, which means, it is actually an outlier. Okay, so these are the reasons why we can always defend and say that, sorry, there is also something called as urban warming. Now, let me take a case study for you to understand better. Okay, now we are in Bangalore. Okay, so for the convenience of the participants from outside Bangalore, I'm sure most of the Bangaloreans will be aware of it. Okay, now let's try to understand what exactly happened to Bangalore. Bangalore, once upon a time, had an awesome climate, sobriquet climate, which means, probably our, ancestors or, grandfathers, they never had to even switch on an air conditioner during summertime. But today, in the summertime, you still need the fan. Today, even in the night, you still need the fan. What happened to Bangalore? Oh, I'm sorry, is it Bangalore or is it Bengaluru or is it Greater Bangalore? All for vested interests. But since the day of Tipu Sultan, in fact, Bangalore was not just one piece. Of course, after the discovery of Bangalore or creation of Bangalore by Kempe Gowda, it has undergone a lot of changes. Now, during the time of Tipu Sultan, there were two parts. I'm sure architects will be much aware of this. The Peta, okay, and the fort area. Now it has, as we, after the demise or, after Tipu Sultan was killed in the fourth Anglo-Mysore war, Britishers, surprisingly, they shifted the capital from Srirangapatna to Bangalore for a very simple reason. Bangalore had a climate exactly like that of London. It was really awesome. It was really cool. Thanks to so many natural features, which you have to really scout today if you want to find it. Okay, so as you can see on the screen, the land use pattern of Bangalore has undergone a tremendous change. There's a lot of studies going on, thanks to the efforts of Dr. T.V. Ramchandra from Indian Institute of Science and so forth. So please remember, as from these images, the land use pattern has changed. In simple words, you're looking at loss of natural surfaces, which is being replaced with artificial surfaces. Why is that? Demand. Maybe most of us are aware, but after India got independence, Bangalore witnessed a huge revolution, industrial revolution. Name the industry, it's in Bangalore. BEL, BHEL, okay, so forth. But why is that? Maybe strategic reasons. Bangalore is located at a very good place. It's away from Pakistan or any other neighboring country. It's located on an altitude, okay, at a terrain where no earthquake or no floods can shake it. Oh, maybe not now. Okay, now, yes, Bangalore has changed, but what we need to understand is not the population. It's the population density which is hurting Bangalore. Okay, it's not the number of people, but rather the number of people in the given limited space which is hurting Bangalore. So yes, We are second. China is first, but Chinese still do not have a problem because the population density is quite lesser when it comes to India. So if the population of Bangalore or Bengaluru continues like this, they're going to have trouble, and no smart city can resolve that. So what is this, at what expense has this urbanization come across? You have lost lung spaces. We had Cubbon Park. The image what you see on your top left hand corner is Cubbon Park once upon a time, but now if you go, it's all about the surrounding vehicles and the joggers. The spaces are shrinking. We actually also have a forest. We have a national park, Bannerghatta National Park. How many of us are aware of that? When we go there, we go to the zoo. But no, there is a forest which is also undergoing a lot of degradation thanks to urbanization. Now let's come to the best part. Water. Water everywhere, no drop to drink. Now, thanks to Kempegowda, Bangalore was once upon a time called as the land of 1,000 tanks, not lakes. They were all man-made tanks. Okay, we never had rivers. Okay, so we had 3 valley systems, but as urbanization happened, thanks to government initiatives, many of these lakes have disappeared. Okay, maybe encroachment, maybe conversion for urban spaces, maybe conversion of a lake into Kempegowda bus stand, and hospitals and stadiums, you name it, you have it. Okay, now what is the outcome of this? These natural surfaces, it could be a forest or a greenery, the tall trees or the water bodies, they had some role to play in influencing the climate of Bangalore, and you are just dealing it away. Okay, now the sad part is we had apartments which is called as Lakeview apartments, but nowadays people do not want to go for that. Why? It's not Lakeview, it is sewage view, and you've got mosquitoes which can easily go up to 15th floor also. So people are actually understanding that Bangalore's urbanization is not good. It is not planned. It is actually inorganic urbanization. What can be more sad? Okay, what can be really sad is probably given Kempegowda would have felt very bad, if he looks at Bangalore today. Okay, a gentleman who created 1,000 tanks, understanding the need of what its population would be. He was so smart, one tank to the another tank, there was a nala. Okay, there was a natural nala. Whenever it rained, okay, once the first tank gets filled, the overflow via the nala goes into the next tank. But where have these lakes disappeared? My dear friends, what you're looking at is a lake. Oh, I'm sorry if you cannot see a lake, but yes, thanks to people, thanks to efforts of vested interest or, whatever you call it, but the lakes have disappeared. But somebody felt very bad. Sorry, we have to show that it is still a lake. So they created a small structure like this and say, this is a lake. This is the real remains of Bangalore. Okay, now where did the water go? If the water of the lakes was supposed to be here, and if you have encroached upon it, if you have changed its landscape, what happened to the water? Please remember, all lakes are seasonal. It is rain fed. So what happens to the water? I'll show you what happens to the water. Many of us have experienced it. Just give me a moment. This is where all the water went. The water which was supposed to go into the lakes, okay? So whenever it rains, Bangalore is getting flooded. Yes, for various reasons. Maybe as Shubha ma'am said yesterday, desilting or, encroachments of your nalas. But this is reality. This is harsh reality. So much of water wasted. So this is where our water disappeared to. If smart cities can understand the significance of this, it will definitely help us, which means that you need to go back to the framework of smart cities and understand whether you're talking about water or you're talking about water bodies. This is a very important point from climate sustainability as well. Okay, now all of us have heard about Brigade. All of us have heard about MG Road. I know definitely that during COVID, those places are just deserted. But they also once upon a time were a rural landscape. You cannot believe. Just look at the images on your screen. Okay, what it was during the British rule or independence and how it has transformed. All these transformations have come with a cost. Global warming, urban warming, climate change. Okay, how many of us can actually recognize the photograph on your bottom left-hand corner, the town hall? No, because now all that open space is covered with vehicles. Is this really a smart urbanization we're talking about? Now that, my dear friends, you've understood how Bangalore has got urbanized, let us look at the implications only from climate point of view. Okay, now let's look at these headlines. Okay, you can see here that Bangalore records highest temperature since 1931. Okay, rise in Bangalore's temperature is due to high carbon emissions. That means they are directly attributing this to global warming. Okay, now let's look at this. Bangalore has its hottest summer in the last 85 years, and probably, again, you're giving, you're crediting it to global warming. And if you actually have a debate, if you actually have an interaction, what would they say? Global warming. Why? Very simple. The entire earth is getting heated up. Okay, it's a cauldron. Bangalore is no exception. Maybe I definitely disagree with that. Yes, Bangalore is also facing the implications of global warming, but Bangalore is also facing something which is making global warming worse. Now, this is a projection of the annual variation of temperature maximum and minimum for Bangalore. Okay, I'm talking from 1900 to 2000. Yes, global warming exists. You can see the temperature level rising. The mean maximum and the mean minimum has risen. Yes, I support you. Yes, this is global warming. But again, there is something which is missing. Something, if it is ignored in a smart city concept, the perils will continue. Now, let's look at this. Very simple. During my PhD or during my doctoral research, I had identified 12 locations in Bangalore. Okay, it was again based on the geographical location, the landscape, the features it portrayed, and when I collected the data, you can see that the temperature is rising and falling, in a similar manner. But why is that? These lines are not overlying each other. That's because that's not global warming. You're looking at urban warming. Okay, if you look at these time series plots, if you actually calculate day by y by day by x, or that is, if you actually find out the slope of these lines, you'll understand that some of these lines are steep and some of them are gradual, that means some of these places within Bangalore are becoming hotter at a faster rate than some other place. Bangalore is not Bangalore is not a heat island. Let me make it very clear. Bangalore is definitely not a heat island. Okay, rather I would say that Bangalore contains urban heat archipelagos. We have multiple heat islands within Bangalore. The very definition of heat island has been breached, and that is only because of urbanization. Let me explain to you. I have told you that heat island is a phenomenon wherein the city is hot, okay, but the neighboring landscape is cool. But if you look at Bangalore, if you look at the master plan, I don't believe that we have left Bangalore. It is no more Bangalore. It has become greater Bangalore. Once upon a time, Peenya, Whitefield, they were all the outskirts of Bangalore, but now they are part of Bangalore. I'm sure MS Ramaiah is very close to Peenya. Okay, Peenya, which has the credit to be the largest small-scale industrial sector in the world, and also has the infamous reputation of being the most populated place in India. There's only Bhadravati which tags it, but yes, of course, there's some changes happening. But what I'm trying to tell you is, when you deal with smart cities, when you're talking about climate sustainable smart cities, you need to understand and respect the concept of boundaries. If you keep expanding the boundaries, then whatever good work a town planner or authority or government of India is doing will not suffice. Okay, let's make it very simple. If I really want my city to become cooler, I need the warmth to be dissipated. So I need, sinks. I need lateral landscapes like forest or a water body which can take the heat. But when you look around and if you do not have it, then the problem of urban heat island will continue to persist. It's like, you are in a cauldron. Now, thanks to this, you're in an oven or a furnace. You're becoming more and more hot. Okay, so what exactly is a problem? Let me try to give you a simpler example. In order to tell you why urban warming is more fatal, let me just give a simple example. Let's say you have got two locations in Bangalore. Location A, which is a city, location B, which is a village. let's say location A has a temperature of 28 degrees Celsius. You admit, yes, it is hot. Let's say the location B, which is village, has a temperature of 23 degrees Celsius. It is cool. Okay. So global warming happens. The temperature rises. Let's say 2 degrees. I'm just being erratic, but yes, let's say 2 degrees have risen. So city rises from 28 to 30. And the village transforms from 23 to 25, which is still hot. The city is still hot. That means if we persist with the urbanization that we are undertaking, okay, if the smart cities do not indulge in monitoring this climate shift, then the cities will still continue to suffer. Okay, and unfortunately, when you are converting villages also into cities, you're doing no good because you're not allowing those heat to dissipate anywhere. Now, what is the problem when it comes to your urban climatology? Slightly, this is a little technical, but let me try to shed some light on this. What are the problems that we are facing with respect to urban warming studies? I'm sure all of you have heard about this, the 3 kind of lies. Lies, damned lies, and if somebody from audience can answer my question, I just hope you've not gone to coma or something. There are 3 kind of lies. Lies, damned lies, and can somebody answer that for me? I sincerely believe, Jyoti ma'am, I'm still audible, right?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yes.
Okay, and I sincerely believe that my audience has not gone to sleep. But yes, the 3 kind of lies, damned lies, and statistics. Okay, numbers. Okay. Now, let me give an example to make you realize what is the importance of numbers. Now, let me give a simple example. We are all civil engineers, at least most of us are, and we know the importance of storm hydrograph. We speak about rainfall, precipitation. We speak about data collection. Okay. Now, how do we do it? We have got weather stations also in forest areas. Okay. Throughout the country, we have weather stations. We have forests. Now, in every forest, we have some gauges, maybe a tipping rain gauge or anything for that matter, wherein water is collected whenever it precipitates, and then this data is given to IMD. This data is given to the government bodies. Okay. Now let me tell you how numbers can change things. One of the forest, I will not name the forest, in India, there was a rain gauge wherein a person who is not educated, okay, because most of the forest staff are on contract basis. Okay. So his job was not just to monitor poachers or wildlife. His job was also to write down the readings of how much of water is collected in that structure you see. Now, on one particular day, this gentleman had to go due to some emergency. So he caught some friend or a relative of his and asked him to, just take this look at the situation. So this gentleman, he was looking at the books and he was seeing that this person had written some values every day, 3 mm, 2 mm, 1 mm. Okay, every day he wrote some readings. But then on this particular day, it had never rained. So this guy got scared. He got really scared. Oh my God, will there be an action on my friend because I'm not able to enter any data? So this gentleman, he poured water into the structure and he only wrote a reading. Now, this reading went to the government of India. This reading went to IMD. Thank God it had not rained in that entire belt. So they were able to identify what exactly happened. But what we need to understand is urban warming is being downplayed because of data anomalies. In the manner in which we compute the intensity of heat island is totally wrong. Okay. Now, in simple words, if I want, I don't want to complicate things with these equations, but if I want to make it very simple, I'll tell you how they have computed the intensity of heat islands. If I want to, compare, let us say I have 2 people, Mr. X and Mr. Y, and I say Mr. X is 100 kg and Mr. Y is 50 kg, and I ask you a question, who is heavier? Your answer will be Mr. X. But if I put a condition, Mr. X was 100 kgs in 1970 and Mr. Y is 50 kg in 2000, who is heavier? Definitely, there is no answer for this. Because they are 2 different time periods, time intervals. You cannot compare that. Most of the urban warming studies, urban climate studies have happened in this manner. They have computed data keeping different intervals. okay, which is totally irrelevant. This is something which I had identified in my doctorate, just putting across to you. Okay, and as an outcome of my doctoral studies, I came up with something called as relative magnitude analysis, which was to plug all these gaps in data science. And it is only because of an outcome of this that we were able to exhibit that yes, urban warming exists in a very strong manner in Bangalore. If you even look at this graph, okay, it shows very clearly how different formulae by different researchers give different results. But what is more important? Conditions. Okay, since you're civil engineers, you know, when we teach about, let's say, water demand, okay, you speak about fire demand. So there are so many empirical relationships that a teacher like me teaches a student. And you know, a university would rather ask in the question paper, as per so and so formulae, tell me the demand. But my question is, did I teach my student the conditions under which these demands apply? Can I, you know, all these empirical relationships have been derived based on some assumptions, say based on some conditions, and these assumptions and conditions cannot apply, you know, any place just like that. That is something which has been hurting urban warming also. Okay, this is all the urban warming studies. They have taken the standard assumption that, you know, every house in India or every house in this world, okay, all the houses facing each other, they're of the same height. Every road in this country or any country have the same width. Impossible. Especially if you come to Bangalore, okay, you might be driving on a road and suddenly you end up on a dead end. These are all strong violations of your assumptions. So in order to plug these, anomalies, so again we had to come up with a new empirical relationship. We had to come out with, you know, statistical solutions. We had to come out with reality, that how to plug these issues. So my dear friends, what I'm trying to tell you here is, it's not just about you know, climate change. It's not just about global warming. It's not just about urban warming. Okay, if you tell me that pollution is causing climate change, let me tell you, climate change can make the pollution worse. What New Delhi is rather facing now is not just because of pollution. The intensity of the pollution has been magnified thanks to the climate it has. So if we do not respect the climate of your locality or your lat long, okay, if you don't respect it, any planning I and you do will be in vain. I'm almost to the end of my presentation. Okay, so I'll be rushing through these because it is beyond the scope of the, you know, today's topic. But what we need to understand is, you know, when you speak about climate sustainable cities, you need to first of all understand these are not, your solutions are definitely not gonna be credible or incredible throughout the country or throughout the world. Every city has its own features, every city has its own natural landscapes, every city is situated at some lat long. So you need to look at the climate zone before you start talking about climate sustainability. And yes, most importantly, let's start respecting a master plan. Okay, when a master plan has been developed for so many years, let's not breach it. Okay, now probably Dabaspet is very close to even my institute, and it is supposed to be on the outskirts. It is supposed to be an industrial, we have a TSDF, hazardous waste management facility there, and we are very close to it. So if we continue to breach the master plans, it's not going to work. Okay, now yes, there are always two ways to have a solution: corrective measures, preventive measures. Yes, we can do that. Unfortunately, we cannot demolish entire Bangalore and start over. But yes, we can have corrective measures. In fact, the master plan of Chandigarh is one of the best examples of how a city should be. Okay. Now, I'll just rush through this. This is a master plan which was developed by me as an outcome of my doctoral research, wherein I was trying to tell you that, I was trying to tell the audience, or trying to tell my reviewers, or trying to tell the town planning authority that, if you try to inculcate a master plan like this, which gives respect to the natural landscapes in certain proportions. Yes, I'm not telling you that, my entire master plan is 100% built up spaces. Okay, I'm a person who's spending most of time in the forest area. I'm not even telling you that my entire built up space is greenery or water. There is a systematic, a sustainable, a saturated manner in which the percentages have been computed based on the 3-year studies which I did on my climate of Bangalore. So yes, something like this has to be taken care. Something like this has to be understood. Something like this has to be incorporated if you want to develop something which is called as a climate sustainable smart city. Yes, most important thing for this is sensors. Most important thing for this is your IoT. Okay, integration of this will definitely make it easier. Wherein I have taken, maybe I have toiled very hard to develop a master plan like this, but with new technologies coming up, with optical fibers being as abundant as your wind, okay, I'm sure these things can be taken at a greater pace. But just to shed some light on how I've developed it, I just looked at nature. Okay, what is the natural orientation of sun? What is the natural wind path? We have been all obstructing wind paths. Respect nature. Okay, live in harmony with nature. If you can do that, any smart city will become climate sustainable. You don't have to even, install air conditioners or fans. You don't have to switch them on most of the time. If you can utilize, I would rather not use the word exploit. I would rather say utilize. If you can utilize these natural facilities which are already available, then your smart city can become a climate sustainable smart city. But yes, you need to think, you need to evolve, you need to develop strategies, technologies to monitor it. It is not just sufficient to develop something and leave it, okay? We also have to monitor it. Is it really efficient? Because, if there's a disaster, the recovery must be effective. Okay, so I'm just rushing through the master plan. So if you look at this slide, my dear friends, all these attributes or, facet that I'm mentioning here is actually there in the framework of smart cities. So they're all part of it, but we need to think about them in a more serious manner. So how does this help? Smart city is a concept which helps so many stakeholders, but mostly we tend to forget the climatologist. If you include that, it can make wonders. So we're all speaking about, corrective measures, but let's remember one thing. We always say prevention is better than cure. And I believe that has to be maintained even when it comes to developing a smart city. Okay, otherwise you will continue to see headlines like this, wherein town planners are shocked why there are heat islands in the city, but the town planners do not realize that it's a consequence of combining so many villages and making it to one Peenya industrial urban hub area. Yes, we need everything, but are they really sustainable? Are they really manageable? Okay, now I'm really worried. I just showed you a video of global warming, how it is going to take away cities which are near the coast. Now let's look at one of the famous case studies. Many people, I'm sure you heard about Maya, the Mayan civilization, and we have our own reasons. Mars attack. We had dinosaurs. We had asteroids. But the reality why the Mayan civilization disappeared was nothing to do with this. It was a very simple mistake that the people did. And if we do not learn from that mistake, it is no far long that our civilization also will disappear. Kindly look at this image. It's a slideshow. It's a transformation of how Mayan civilization could have disappeared. So my dear friends, basically what happened is, Mayan civilization literally disappeared thanks to deforestation. They started cutting down trees left and right. They started building temples for, satisfying God. Unfortunately, they forgot that, the ultimate God remains nature. When you remove the entire forest away, you're impacting the hydrological cycle. You're impacting the groundwater levels. Unfortunately, the Mayans disappeared because the climate was not favorable for them. The water was no longer favorable for them. My dear friends, I'm done with the presentation, but whatever said and done, we always need to remember anything we do has to be sustainable in nature. Anything we do, we need to speak about sustainability always. And when it especially comes to smart cities, the statement by Alan Lakin makes perfect sense. If you fail to plan it properly, we are definitely planning to fail. Okay, now on a lighter note, we always can say, probably I may get comments at the end of this presentation, sir, what does it make? What difference will it make that whatever I feel or you feel, there's not going to be any change? Really? I need to ask a question once again. Definitely there is going to be a change. One person can make a difference. Your views can make a difference. Tomorrow, if you're in a position wherein you can take decisions, you can make a difference. So my presentation today is not just aimed at the great intellects who are on the other side of the web. My knowledge transfer is mainly for one request. If you can share my knowledge to your immediate neighborhood, to your students, I'm sure tomorrow that boy or girl will be in a position to take decisions which will be for our longevity. Okay, now on a lighter note, please understand, we are social creatures. People usually say humanity, animosity, humanity, humans, animosity, animals. That definition is no longer valid. We need to understand that smart cities cannot just come up at the expense of the natural habitat. That is going to have consequences. Whenever you speak about man-animal conflict, it's not they came to your house. You ventured into their area. No, you actually need to explore it further. Okay. In fact, animals have more discipline when it comes to when compared to humans. If discipline is not in practice when it comes to your planning of smart cities or implementing it, your smart city is going to collapse. Okay. This is the unfortunate state of education here, wherein we blame. Maybe ethics are to be blamed if cities are failing apart, if cities are falling apart. Okay, I'm just referring to civil engineer. It can be any engineer for that matter. Ethics is a very integral component when it comes to smart city also, because you are looking at implications which is beyond your knowledge. It's very easy to say that, I can predict the weather, I can predict the climate. I'm very sorry. It cannot be done to 100% accuracy. Most important, standardization. Even when you speak about smart cities, there are ISO codes which are being evolved. There are ISO codes which are part of it. Okay, these also needs to be implemented precisely. Otherwise, smart city will no longer be smart. And what is it I and you can do? Rather than waiting for the government of India to develop a smart city, I and you can also do our bit. Okay, I'm sure all of us can do that. We all look for that one tree. Okay, even when your smart city concept comes up, let me tell you this. Let's be very honest. Let's be very frank. In the video, what you saw about smart cities, your IoT or your GPS will tell you a vacant space. I'm sure people can, debate with me, but let's be very honest. Okay, tomorrow, if you're driving a car and you want to park a vehicle, if you don't have any technology in your hand, you will definitely look for a free space. And in the free space, if you see there is shade, you will go for that. But if you want your smart city to be really smart, then your technology should give you a space where there is shade. Then only it is really smart. Then only it is environmentally friendly. Smart cities have to have nature-based solutions. You just cannot look at quality of human beings in isolation. It is not going to work out. We need to go back to the concept. We need to remove the concept of ego. You cannot be no longer in human-centric approach. We need to be in nature-centric approach. My dear friends, just to end this presentation, let me make it very clear how much ever smart we are. If we are not in harmony, okay, if we are not able to understand the smartness of the nature, we no longer will be smart. I'm done with my presentation. I thank you, Jyoti ma'am. I thank you one and all.
Thank you very much, sir. And it was a very great, good session.
Thank you, madam. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.